I didn't think a stupid road trip with my childhood best friend was going to change my entire life. Honestly, when Manuel called me and asked if I wanted to drive with him from Texas to Colorado for his cousin's wedding, I almost said no. I'd been buried in work for weeks. My apartment was a mess, and I was already behind on rent after my car needed repairs. The idea of spending 12 straight hours trapped in a car sounded exhausting. But then he said, "Come on, Quentin. It'll be like old times." And that got me, because Manuel had always been my weak spot. We'd known each other since we were 8 years old. Same neighborhood, same school, same soccer team until high school when I quit because I wasn't very good and he was. We basically grew up attached at the hip. Sleepovers every weekend, late-night gaming sessions, summers biking around town until our parents screamed at us to come home. Back then, everybody used to joke that we acted like an old married couple. The worst part? They weren't entirely wrong. The thing is, somewhere around sophomore year, my feelings stopped being friendly. I just never told him. Never could. Manuel was one of those guys who made everybody feel seen. Tall, athletic without trying too hard, messy dark hair, stupidly perfect smile. Girls loved him. Guys wanted to be him. Meanwhile, I was awkward, sarcastic, and spent most of high school pretending I didn't stare at him when he changed shirts after basketball practice. So yeah, I buried it. For years. Even after college. Even after he dated multiple girls. Even after we moved to different cities and only saw each other every few months. None of it changed anything. And apparently, I was dumb enough to agree to a 12-hour road trip with him anyway. The morning we left, I instantly regretted it. Mostly because he opened the door shirtless. "You're late," he said, rubbing his eyes. I nearly dropped my coffee. "You couldn't put on a shirt first?" He smirked. "You've seen me shirtless like a million times." Yeah, that was exactly the problem. I pushed past him into his apartment while he laughed behind me. Same old Manuel. Same easy confidence. Same ability to make me feel 16 again in under 5 seconds. His place was chaos. Open duffel bag on the couch, snacks everywhere, phone charger tangled around a hoodie. "You packed 5 minutes ago, didn't you?" "Technically 3. You're unbelievable." "You still came, though." That grin again. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop smiling. An hour later, we were finally on the road, his old Jeep rattling like it might explode somewhere in New Mexico. At first, everything felt normal. Music blasting, windows down, making fun of each other like we always did. But after the first couple hours, I started noticing little things. The way Manuel kept glancing at me while I talked. The way his hand brushed my knee when he reached for drinks in the center console. The way he smiled whenever I laughed too hard at something stupid. It felt different somehow. Or maybe I was just imagining things, because being alone with him for this long was messing with my head. Around sunset, we stopped at some tiny gas station in the middle of nowhere. The place looked abandoned, except for one flickering light above the entrance. "I'm getting snacks," Manuel announced. "You already bought snacks." "Those were driving snacks. These are emotional support snacks." I snorted. "You're an idiot. Yet you love me." The words hit harder than they should have. He said them casually, jokingly, but my stomach still tightened. Before I could respond, he disappeared inside. I stayed leaning against the Jeep, watching the empty highway stretch out forever under the orange sky. The air smelled like dust and gasoline. Quiet. Isolated. That's when I realized something. This was the longest we'd been alone together in years, No friends around, no distractions, no girlfriends, no group chats buzzing every 5 seconds. Just me and him. And suddenly, that felt dangerous. When Manuel came back, he tossed me a bag of chips. You good? Yeah, I lied. He studied me for a second too long before climbing back into the driver's seat. We drove another hour before darkness completely swallowed the road. That's when the storm hit. Rain slammed against the windshield so hard I could barely see the headlights ahead of us. Thunder rattled the Jeep while Manuel gripped the wheel tighter. This is bad, I muttered. No kidding. The GPS lost signal 10 minutes later. Of course it did. Perfect, Manuel sighed. We're definitely dying out here. You're so dramatic, says the guy white-knuckling the seatbelt. I looked down. He wasn't wrong. Eventually, he slowed the Jeep near a tiny roadside motel with a buzzing neon sign that read, "Vacancy." The place looked sketchy as hell. You have got to be kidding me. What choice do we have? Manuel asked. I can barely see the road. He was right. So 20 minutes later, we were standing inside the world's saddest motel lobby while an exhausted old woman handed us a room key. One room left, she said. My stomach dropped. Manuel didn't notice. Great, thanks. I followed him outside while trying very hard not to overthink the fact we were about to share a motel room. Again. Like we used to during soccer tournaments in high school. Back before I knew exactly why sleeping beside him made me nervous. Rain poured around us as we hurried inside the room. The second the door opened, I groaned. One bed? Manuel blinked. Oh. Yeah. Oh. The room was tiny. One queen bed, one lamp, one bathroom with flickering lights that looked straight out of a horror movie. We can ask for another room, I said quickly. They said this was the last one. I'll sleep in the car. In a thunderstorm? I'll survive. Manuel tossed his bag onto the floor. Quentin, stop being weird. Weird. If only he knew. He sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. Dude, we used to share beds all the time. That was years ago. And I'm hopelessly in love with you. I swallowed hard. Nothing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain hammered the windows while tension filled the tiny room. Then Manuel looked at me strangely. Not joking, not teasing, just looking. You've been acting off all day, he said quietly. My pulse jumped. I'm tired. That's not it. I forced a shrug and looked away. But even then, I could still feel his eyes on me. And somehow, deep down, I had this horrible feeling that this road trip was about to change everything. I barely slept that night. Not because the motel bed was terrible, though it definitely was. And not because the air conditioner sounded like it was fighting for its life every 30 seconds. It was because Manuel was 6 inches away from me. The room had gone quiet hours ago. Rain still tapped softly against the windows, but the storm had mostly passed. The only light came from the flickering motel sign outside, casting red streaks across the ceiling. I was lying stiffly on my side, pretending to sleep. Meanwhile, Manuel looked perfectly relaxed beside me. Of course he did. You awake? He suddenly asked. My heart nearly stopped. Yeah. He shifted onto his back with a sigh. Can't sleep either. Bed feels like concrete. That too. Silence settled again. I stared at the wall, trying not to think about how close his arm was to mine under the blanket. Then he laughed quietly. "What? You remember that camping trip in 8th grade?" I groaned instantly. "No." "Yes, you do. I almost got attacked by raccoons. You screamed like a horror movie victim. They were aggressive." Manuel started laughing harder, and despite myself, I smiled. That was the thing about him. No matter how stressed or miserable I felt, Manuel could always pull me out of my own head without even trying. "You climbed onto me like your life depended on it," he said. "I was 14. You wrapped around me like a koala." "Okay, shut up." He nudged my shoulder lightly. It was cute. Cute. God. I swallowed hard and stared harder at the wall. "You've changed a lot since then," he said after a moment. Something about his voice sounded softer now. "How?" "I don't know." He paused. "You used to tell me everything." That caught me off guard. I finally turned toward him slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know what I mean." I did. Back then, he really had known everything about me. Every dumb crush, every fear, every stupid thought in my head. Until there was one thing I couldn't tell him anymore. "You moved away too," I muttered. "Not like that." The tension in his voice surprised me. I looked over and realized he was already watching me. The red motel light cut across his face, making his expression harder to read. "You disappear sometimes," he said quietly. "Even when you're right there." My chest tightened. "Manuel, you know how many times I almost called you this year?" I blinked. "What?" He let out a humorless laugh. "Forget it." "No, seriously." He rubbed his face tiredly before answering. "I don't know. Things just felt weird between us lately." "Weird." "Yeah, because I was in love with him." "You're still my best friend," I said carefully. "That's not what I'm talking about." My pulse spiked. The room suddenly felt way too small. "What are you talking about then?" For a second, he didn't answer. Then he looked away toward the ceiling. "I dated Emily for almost a year," he said quietly. The random subject change threw me off. "Okay. You know why we broke up?" I frowned. "You said it just wasn't working." "That's what I told everybody." Something shifted in my stomach. Manuel exhaled slowly. "She said I was emotionally unavailable." I tried to joke. "She's not wrong." Usually he'd laugh. This time he didn't. "She thought there was somebody else." My heartbeat started thudding painfully against my ribs. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." "And what was that?" His jaw tightened slightly, that I didn't know how to explain it. I couldn't breathe properly anymore. Every instinct told me to shut this conversation down before I completely embarrassed myself, but I couldn't stop looking at him, and he couldn't stop looking at me either. Then the power went out. The entire room dropped into darkness. "Seriously?" I muttered. Manuel laughed softly somewhere beside me. "Relax." Easy for him to say. Lightning flashed outside a second later, briefly illuminating the room again, and for one terrifying moment, I saw his face clearly. He looked nervous, actually nervous. I had almost never seen Manuel nervous before. "You know what I think?" he asked quietly. "What?" "I think you've been avoiding me." "I haven't." "You have." "Manuel, every time things get remotely serious, you pull away." "That's not true." "It is." His voice wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. I sat up slightly, frustrated now mostly because he wasn't entirely wrong. "You're imagining things." "No, Quentin." His voice dropped lower. I'm really not. Lightning flashed again, and this time I realized how close we were. At some point during the conversation, we'd both shifted toward each other without noticing. My throat felt dry. "Manuel, can I ask you something?" The way he said it made my stomach twist instantly. "Depends." He hesitated, actually hesitated. Then finally, "Have you ever wanted to kiss someone and been too scared to do it?" Everything inside me froze. I stared at him, convinced I had misunderstood. "What?" His eyes searched mine in the darkness. "You heard me. There are moments where your brain completely short-circuits. This was one of them, because suddenly, every little thing from the past year came rushing back all at once. The long looks, the random touches, the late-night calls, the way he always sounded disappointed when I left, the way he looked at me right now. "Oh my God," I whispered before I could stop myself. Manuel's expression shifted slightly. "What? You can't ask me that." "Why not?" "Because if I answered honestly, I'd ruin everything. You're my best friend." That's not an answer. My pulse was so loud I could hear it. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Then, quietly, almost painfully vulnerable, Manuel said, "I think about kissing you all the time." The world actually stopped. I swear it did. Every sound disappeared except my heartbeat. I just stared at him, completely stunned. Manuel gave a nervous laugh, like he instantly regretted saying it. Forget I said that, but I couldn't. I physically couldn't. Because after years of burying everything, after convincing myself I imagined every sign, my childhood best friend had just confessed he wanted to kiss me. And judging by the way he was looking at me now, he meant it. I couldn't speak. Seriously, my brain completely shut down. Manuel looked terrified the second the words left his mouth, like he wanted to grab them out of the air and shove them back inside himself. "Forget it," he said quickly, sitting up. "Seriously, Quentin, I shouldn't have said that." But I was still staring at him, because after years of imagining this moment, I suddenly had no idea what to do with it. "You think about kissing me?" I finally managed. He laughed nervously and rubbed the back of his neck. Wow, hearing it out loud somehow sounds worse. "Manuel, I know this is messed up. No, I'm sorry." The apology hurt more than the confession, because he looked ashamed, and I hated that. "Manuel," I said again, quieter this time. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, fear of losing me. "I don't want you apologizing for that," I said carefully. He blinked. The room stayed dark, except for occasional flashes of lightning outside. Every few seconds his face appeared and disappeared again in pale white light. "I don't know what's wrong with me lately," he admitted quietly. I swear I tried not to say anything. Something in my chest cracked open hearing that. "How long?" I asked before I could stop myself. Manuel hesitated. "Honestly? Yeah, a while." My heartbeat stumbled. "A while as in?" "I don't know." He looked away. "Months, maybe." Months. Seriously. Meanwhile, I'd been suffering for years. "You never said anything." "You never did either." The second he said it, silence hit the room again. Heavy silence. Dangerous silence. I stared at him. "You knew?" "I didn't know," he said quickly. "Not for sure. But you thought—" "I noticed things." I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. What things? Manuel actually smiled a little then, nervous but softer now. The way you looked at me sometimes. My face burned instantly. Shut up. You get weird whenever I dated someone. I did not. You absolutely did. That's because your girlfriends were annoying. He laughed quietly. Sure. God, hearing him laugh right now somehow made everything more intense. I dragged a hand down my face. This is insane. Probably. We're stuck in a motel during a storm and suddenly you confess you want to kiss me? When you say it like that, yeah, sounds pretty bad. I let out a shaky laugh despite myself. Then we both went quiet again. Because underneath the jokes, underneath the nerves, the truth was sitting right there between us now. Neither of us could pretend anymore. Manuel looked down at his hands. I didn't plan to tell you like this. How did you plan to tell me? I didn't. That answer felt honest enough to hurt. He exhaled slowly. I kept trying to convince myself it would go away. My chest tightened because I knew exactly what that felt like. But it didn't, he admitted. Another flash of lightning filled the room. This time, neither of us looked away afterward. You know what messed me up? Manuel asked quietly. What? That night after Tyler's birthday. I frowned slightly. What about it? You got drunk. Oh God. Yeah. I groaned and covered my face. Please don't remind me. Too late, because I remembered now. Last summer, one too many drinks. Manuel driving me home while I rambled nonsense the entire ride. You fell asleep on my shoulder, he said softly. I peeked at him through my fingers. That's not embarrassing. You grabbed my hand. My stomach dropped. What? You don't remember? No. Manuel looked at me carefully before continuing. You held my hand the whole drive. Heat flooded my entire body. Oh my God. And then, he added, clearly trying not to smile now, you mumbled my name in your sleep. I wanted to die. Immediately. Right there. Manuel, you have no idea what that did to me. His voice had gone low again. Warm. Dangerously warm. The air between us suddenly felt electric. I thought maybe I imagined it, he admitted. But after that, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I couldn't breathe properly anymore, because every fantasy I'd spent years trying to kill was standing right in front of me, looking back with the same feelings. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to ruin us, he said quietly. That makes two of us. The second the words slipped out, his expression changed. Not shocked, relieved. Like hearing me admit it finally let him breathe again. You mean that? He asked softly. I laughed nervously. I think I've been in love with you since I was 17, so yeah, probably. The room went completely silent. Manuel just stared at me. Actually stared. Then suddenly he looked overwhelmed. Quentin. I'd never heard him say my name like that before. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. And honestly, that almost broke me more than the confession itself. I looked down quickly because I couldn't handle the intensity in his eyes anymore. That's why I pulled away sometimes, I admitted quietly. Being around you got hard. Manuel shifted closer before he could stop himself. How hard? I looked up instantly. He froze too, realizing how that sounded. Then he started laughing into his hand. Oh my God, I didn't mean... You absolutely did. No, I swear. Okay, maybe a little. I laughed harder than I had all week, mostly because the tension was becoming unbearable, and somehow that helped. The nerves eased just enough for us to breathe again, but Manuel was still closer now, close enough that I could feel his warmth, close enough that if either of us leaned forward, "Can I ask something else?" he said quietly. I nodded carefully. "If I kissed you right now," my pulse exploded, "would you stop me?" Every single thought vanished from my head. He wasn't joking anymore, and judging by the way his eyes kept flicking down toward my mouth, he really wanted to do it. I should have slowed things down. I should have thought about consequences, about friendship, about complications, about how badly this could destroy both of us if things went wrong. Instead, I heard myself whisper, "No." Manuel inhaled sharply. Then for one terrifying second, neither of us moved, like we were both standing on the edge of something massive. And then he reached for my face. His hand was warm against my jaw. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the storm outside, not the motel room, not even the fact my childhood best friend was inches away from kissing me. Just his hand. Manuel looked nervous again, but this time there was something else mixed into it too. Relief, maybe. Like after years of holding himself back, he finally didn't have to anymore. "You sure?" he asked softly. I nodded before I could lose my nerve. That was all it took. He kissed me carefully at first, tentative, like he still thought I might pull away. But the second his lips touched mine, every thought in my head completely disappeared. I kissed him back instantly, harder than I meant to. Manuel made this quiet, surprised sound against my mouth, and then suddenly his other hand grabbed my waist, pulling me closer across the bed. And honestly, that's when everything became very, very real. Because this wasn't some drunk mistake. This wasn't curiosity. This was years of tension finally snapping all at once. The kiss deepened fast, messy, desperate, like both of us had been starving for it. I grabbed the front of his shirt without even thinking, while he kissed me harder, his thumb brushing my cheek gently enough to completely ruin me. "Manuel," I breathed against his mouth. Hearing his name like that seemed to affect him too. He pulled back just enough to look at me, breathing hard. You have no idea how long I wanted to do that. My chest felt dangerously full. "You picked a terrible time to finally try." He laughed softly, forehead resting against mine. "Yeah, probably." But neither of us moved apart. If anything, we drifted even closer. I could feel his heartbeat, fast, almost as fast as mine. Then his expression changed slightly, more serious now. "Quentin," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me if this is real." I blinked. "What?" "I mean it." Something vulnerable flashed across his face again. "I can't do this if tomorrow you freak out and pretend it didn't happen." The fact he was worried about that nearly broke me. "Manuel." "No, seriously." His voice stayed soft but firm. "I need to know." I stared at him for a second before answering honestly. "This is the most real thing I've felt in years." His entire expression softened. Then he kissed me again. Slower this time, more deliberate. Like now that the truth was finally out, neither of us had to rush anymore. I don't know how long we stayed like that, kissing, smiling between kisses, pulling apart just enough to stare at each other in disbelief before kissing again. At one point, Manuel laughed quietly against my neck. What? I still can't believe this. Same. You're telling me I could have been kissing you this whole time? I snorted. You're unbelievable. I'm serious. So am I. You took forever. He grinned against my skin. Worth the wait? God. I shoved his shoulder lightly while trying not to smile too hard. Shut up. But he looked happy. Actually happy. And honestly, I don't think I'd ever seen Manuel look like that before. Then the mood shifted again. Subtle at first. His hand resting on my waist a little longer. My fingers brushing through his hair. The silence growing heavier between us. Not awkward, just charged. Manuel swallowed slightly before speaking. Can I tell you something embarrassing? Depends how embarrassing. He looked weirdly nervous again. I almost confessed before this trip. That surprised me. When? The night we got tacos after your birthday. I frowned, remembering it vaguely. You barely talked that night. Exactly. I laughed softly. You were freaking out? I was dying. That made me smile way too hard. Manuel shook his head. You looked stupidly good that night, too. It was making things worse. You're such an idiot. You like it. Unfortunately, yes. The realization hit me all over again then. This was real. Manuel liked me. Not temporarily, not drunkenly, not secretly anymore. And somehow that still felt impossible. I think he noticed me getting quiet because his expression softened again. What's going on in your head? Honestly? Always. I hesitated, then finally admitted, I'm scared this is going to disappear when morning comes. The second I said it, Manuel moved closer again. Not happening. You don't know that. I do. How? Because I know how I feel about you. His voice carried this calm certainty that made my chest ache. I've spent months trying not to want this, he admitted quietly, and it only got worse. Worse. The word shouldn't have sounded so good. You know what finally messed me up? He asked. What? That time you fell asleep on my couch. I frowned slightly. That narrows it down absolutely zero. He laughed. Okay, fair. The movie night at my apartment. Then I remembered. I'd crashed there after too many drinks. Woke up with a blanket over me and aspirin on the coffee table. You carried me to the couch, I realized. Yeah. You were weirdly nice about it. I was trying very hard not to stare at you. Heat rushed into my face instantly. Manuel grinned. There it is. Shut up. You blush so easily around me. Because you say insane things. His smile softened again. No, he said quietly. I think it's because you like me. The way he said it, gentle, almost disbelieving, made my chest tighten painfully, like he still couldn't fully believe it himself. So before I could overthink it, I kissed him again. And this time, Manuel kissed me back with zero hesitation. His hand slid into my hair while mine grabbed his shirt tighter, and suddenly we were both breathing hard again. The tension that had built for years was impossible to hide now. Every touch felt too intense. Every kiss lasted longer than the last one. At some point, Manuel pulled back slightly, eyes dark in the dim motel light. You know what's driving me crazy? He murmured. What? The fact I have to stop every 5 seconds just to remember this is actually happening. I laughed softly. Then his thumb brushed across my lower lip, and my entire body reacted instantly. Manuel noticed too. The look he gave me after that nearly destroyed whatever self-control I had left. "Quentin," he said quietly. "Yeah, I really want to kiss you again." "That's good," I whispered. "Why?" "Because I really want you to." And judging by the way his expression changed, that answer affected him way more than I expected. I don't know how we eventually stopped kissing long enough to breathe. At some point, we ended up tangled together near the middle of the motel bed, half under the blankets, both looking completely wrecked. Manuel was lying on his side, facing me, one arm draped lazily across my waist. And somehow that simple little thing felt more intimate than anything else. Outside, the storm had finally started fading. The rain softened into this quiet, steady rhythm against the windows. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then Manuel smiled suddenly. "What?" "I'm just thinking about how insane this is." I laughed softly. "You said that like 20 times. Because it keeps hitting me again." His fingers traced lightly against my side through my shirt, absent-minded and warm. "You know what's really messing with me?" he asked. "What?" "You've been my favorite person for basically my entire life." That hit me right in the chest. Manuel looked down briefly before continuing. "I think part of me always knew there was something different about you." The room felt impossibly quiet now. "When did you realize?" I asked carefully. He thought about it for a second. "Honestly? Yeah, probably last winter." "That recent?" He nodded slightly. "I came home after that awful date with Emily's friend." I immediately laughed. "The girl who said pineapple belongs on every pizza?" She was terrifying. "You looked miserable." "I was miserable." He smiled faintly. "And then I called you afterward." I remembered that too. We'd talked for almost 3 hours that night about absolutely nothing. "You made me laugh so hard I forgot how bad the date was," he said quietly. "And afterward I just sat there thinking." He stopped. "Thinking what?" His eyes met mine again. "That I wanted to talk to you more than anybody else." God. I looked away before my face got even hotter. Manuel laughed softly. "There it is again." "What?" "That look you get." I groaned. "Stop analyzing me. I can't help it. You're annoying. And you still kissed me." "Fair point." He shifted closer again until our knees brushed under the blanket. The movement felt natural now. Easy. Like we'd been doing this longer than a few hours. Which honestly scared me a little. "You okay?" Manuel asked immediately. I blinked. "Yeah." "You disappeared again." Of course he noticed. I sighed quietly. "I'm just trying to process this." His expression softened. "You want to know something embarrassing? There's apparently a lot of that tonight. I was terrified you'd reject me." I stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely." "Manuel, I've practically been in love with you forever." "Yeah, but from my perspective, you're impossible to read." I actually laughed at that. "Me?" "Yes, you. That's insane. You literally spent years staring at me like you wanted to fight me emotionally." I covered my face with a groan. "Oh my God." He pulled my hands away gently, smiling. "It's kind of cute now, though." The way he said cute again made my stomach flip embarrassingly hard. Manuel noticed that too, judging by the smug little grin spreading across his face. "Wow." "Don't." You really do react every time I flirt with you. You literally just confessed feelings in a motel room. I'm still recovering." He laughed quietly before his thumb brushed across my cheek again. That tiny touch instantly shifted the mood. Again. His smile faded into something softer, more careful. "You know what I wanted to do earlier?" he asked quietly. "What?" "When you were driving." I swallowed hard. "What?" He hesitated just long enough to make my pulse spike. "I wanted to hold your hand." The confession was so simple, so sincere, that it completely ruined me. Not because it was physical, because it wasn't. It was somehow worse, because I could hear how real it was. Manuel looked embarrassed after saying it too. "Forget it, that sounded stupid." "No," I said immediately. "It didn't." He searched my face for a second, like he was checking if I meant that. Then, quietly, I kept thinking about it the whole drive. I don't know what came over me then, but I reached down under the blanket until I found his hand and laced our fingers together. Manuel went completely still. The look on his face afterward nearly killed me, like nobody had ever held his hand that way before. His grip tightened around mine slowly. "Quentin, you talk too much," I muttered softly. He laughed under his breath, but he didn't let go. We stayed like that for a while, just lying there holding hands like two idiots who'd wasted years being terrified of each other. Eventually, Manuel shifted onto his back, still holding on to me. "You know what's funny?" he said. "What?" "If someone told 16-year-old me this would happen, I probably would have passed out." I snorted. 16-year-old me would have passed out too. "You were so obvious at 16. I turned toward him instantly. "Excuse me?" He used to stare at me during basketball practice. I froze. Oh my God. He thought nobody noticed. "I hate you." "No, you don't." Unfortunately true. Manuel grinned at the ceiling. Coach definitely noticed, though. I sat up in horror. "What?" "He asked me once if you had a crush on somebody on the team. I wanted to throw myself through the motel window." "And what did you say?" I said, "Probably." "You're evil. You're dramatic." I dropped back onto the pillow while Manuel laughed beside me. God, I loved hearing him laugh. The realization slipped into my chest so naturally this time that it didn't even scare me anymore. I loved him. Not quietly anymore, not secretly. And somehow he loved me too. The thought still felt unreal. Manuel must have noticed me getting quiet again because he turned toward me, expression softer now. "What?" I hesitated before answering honestly. "I'm really happy right now." His face changed instantly, like hearing that mattered more than anything else I could have said. Then he leaned over and kissed me once. Slow, gentle. "I've wanted to hear you say that for a long time," he whispered against my mouth. And somewhere deep down, I realized this road trip had already become the most important night of my life. I woke up before Manuel did. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I felt his arm around my waist, and everything came rushing back. The motel room was quiet now, soft morning light spilling through the curtains. The storm had completely passed sometime during the night. Manuel was still asleep beside me, or at least I thought he was. His hair was a mess, one leg tangled with mine under the blanket, his face relaxed in a way I almost never saw. Usually he slept like he was preparing for battle, but right now, he looked peaceful and ridiculously attractive. I smiled before I could stop myself. God, I was screwed. Carefully, I shifted slightly, trying not to wake him. Bad idea. His arm tightened around me instantly. Don't move." I froze. You were awake? Barely. His voice was rough with sleep. What time is it? No idea. He buried his face against my shoulder dramatically. Then legally, we can't leave yet. I laughed softly. That's not how laws work. Says who? Manuel. He finally lifted his head enough to look at me and immediately smiled. Not his usual self-assured grin either. Something softer, more genuine. It hit me embarrassingly hard. Morning, he murmured. Morning. Then he kissed me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Slow, sleepy, warm. And honestly, that kiss somehow felt even more dangerous than last night's. Because now there was no panic behind it. No years of tension exploding all at once. Just affection. Real affection. When he pulled back, he stayed close enough that our noses brushed. You're smiling, he whispered. So are you. Can you blame me? No, not really. Manuel stared at me for another second before groaning dramatically and dropping his forehead onto my chest. What? I have a problem. You discovering this now? He laughed against me. No, seriously. What problem? I'm kinda obsessed with kissing you. Heat crawled up my neck instantly. There it is, he muttered smugly without lifting his head. Blushing again. You notice too much. You're easy to read when you're flustered. I shoved his shoulder lightly. Shut up. Instead, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me closer again. The smile faded from his face after a second, though. Not completely, just enough that I noticed. What? I asked quietly. Manuel hesitated, then finally, You okay about this? I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, he rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly now. Us. The way he said us made my stomach flip, but I could hear the nervousness underneath it too. You regret it? I asked carefully. His eyes widened instantly. No, God, no. The relief in his voice came so fast it almost made me laugh. I just don't want things to get weird for you. Too late for that. I looked at him for a second before answering honestly. Manuel, I think things have been weird for me since you tackled me into a pool when we were 15. He stared at me, then burst out laughing. That's your realization moment? You looked unfairly good, wet. Oh my God. You asked? He laughed harder, collapsing back against the pillow. You're unbelievable. So are you. The room fell quiet again after that. But this time it wasn't tense, just comfortable, easy. Manuel eventually reached over and intertwined our fingers again absent-mindedly. And that tiny little gesture somehow made my chest ache more than the kissing did, because it felt couple-ish, real, dangerously real. You know what's weird? He asked quietly. What? I don't even feel nervous anymore. I looked at him carefully. Seriously? He nodded slowly. I thought I would, but honestly, his thumb brushed against my hand. This just feels right. That sentence settled deep in my chest, because I felt it too, which scared me a little. Not because I didn't want this, because I wanted it way too much. Manuel studied my face for a second. You're thinking again. I can't help it. What now? I hesitated before admitting, what happens after the trip? His expression softened immediately. You mean when we get back home? Yeah. The reality of it suddenly hit me all at once. This motel room felt isolated from the world, safe somehow. But eventually we'd have to go back to normal life. Friends, family, reality. Manuel was quiet for a moment before answering. Well, he squeezed my hand gently. I know one thing. What? I'm not pretending this didn't happen. The certainty in his voice surprised me again. You're really serious about this, I said softly. He looked almost offended. Quentin, I confessed feelings in a terrifying roadside motel during a thunderstorm. I laughed. I'd better be serious. God. I leaned forward and kissed him before I could stop myself. Manuel smiled into it immediately. You know, he murmured against my mouth. I like this version of you. What version? The one that kisses me first. My face burned instantly. He grinned. Cute. You're enjoying this way too much. Absolutely. I rolled my eyes, but honestly, I loved seeing him like this. Relaxed, happy, open. Like some invisible wall between us had finally disappeared overnight. Then suddenly his stomach growled loudly enough to echo through the room. I stared at him. Manuel looked deeply offended by his own body. Traitor. I started laughing so hard I nearly fell off the bed. Not a word, he warned. You just confessed your love and got betrayed by your stomach immediately after. It's been an emotional night. Apparently. He tackled me backward into the mattress before I could keep making fun of him. And for one dangerous second, we both froze again. Because now he was half on top of me, close enough that I could feel his breath, close enough that his expression slowly changed from playful to something else entirely. The room suddenly felt warmer. Manuel looked down at me carefully. You know, he said quietly, this is exactly the kind of situation teenage me fantasized about. My pulse jumped. Oh, really? Absolutely. And what happened in the fantasy? His eyes flicked down toward my mouth again, then back up slowly. I finally kissed you sooner. We stayed in that motel room way longer than we meant to, mostly because every time one of us tried to get up, the other found an excuse to stay. You're distracting me, I muttered while trying to pull on my hoodie. Manuel was sitting against the headboard, watching me with absolutely zero shame. That's because you look good in my clothes. I looked down. At some point during the night, I'd apparently stolen his hoodie instead of mine. Oh, he grinned. Keep it. You're weirdly domestic all of a sudden. You held my hand while half asleep, he shot back. You started it. Unfortunately true. Eventually, we managed to leave the room after grabbing terrible motel coffee and arguing over who smelled worse after sleeping through a thunderstorm with no proper blankets. The second we stepped outside, the world felt different, cleaner somehow. The sky was bright blue again, the roads still wet from the storm. Manuel stretched beside the Jeep with a groan. His shirt lifted slightly, exposing a strip of skin, and immediately my brain stopped functioning. He noticed too. Oh my God, he laughed. You're staring again. I hate you. No, you don't. I groaned because he was becoming way too powerful now that he knew. The drive felt completely different after that. Not awkward, just charged. Every little thing suddenly mattered. His hand brushing mine when he passed me coffee. His knee resting against mine while he drove. The way he kept smiling to himself randomly, like he physically couldn't stop. At one point, I caught him looking at me again. What? He shook his head, smiling stupidly. Nothing. Manuel. I'm just happy. That answer hit embarrassingly hard. I looked out the window quickly before he caught my expression. Too late. There it is again, he said softly. What? That look. You're making things up. I really am not. God. Around noon, we stopped at a diner off the highway. The place was almost empty, except for an older couple near the windows and a tired waitress refilling coffees. Manuel slid into the booth across from me, still smiling like an idiot. You need to calm down. I literally can't. You're being suspiciously cheerful. Maybe I had a good night. Heat rushed straight to my face. The waitress picked the absolute worst moment to walk over. Well, she said while setting down menus, you two are adorable. Both of us froze. I think my soul briefly left my body. Meanwhile, Manuel looked way too pleased with himself. Thank you, he said immediately. I kicked him under the table. Ow! The waitress laughed and walked away while I buried my face in my hands. We're never coming back here. She's right, though. I looked up instantly. Manuel was watching me with that same soft expression again, the one that completely destroyed my ability to think normally. You realize you're impossible now, right? I muttered. You like impossible. Unfortunately, yes. After lunch, we got back on the road, and somewhere during the next couple hours, something shifted again. Not physically, emotionally. The excitement from the motel started settling into something quieter, more real. Manuel drove with one hand on the wheel while music played softly through the speakers. Then, without warning, he reached over toward the center console, toward me. My pulse jumped before I realized he was just offering his hand. I stared at it for a second, then intertwined our fingers without a word. Manuel smiled immediately, and just like that, everything felt calm again. You know what I keep thinking about? He asked quietly after a while. What? How close I came to never saying anything. I looked over at him. He kept his eyes on the road, but his grip tightened slightly around my hand. I almost skipped this trip, he admitted. That surprised me. Why? Because being around you was getting hard. The honesty in his voice made my chest ache. I thought maybe some distance would fix it. Did it? He laughed softly. Obviously not. I smiled despite myself. Then his expression turned more serious. I need to ask something. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. He glanced at me briefly before looking back at the road. What are we now? The question settled heavily between us. Not because I didn't know, because I did. And saying it out loud somehow made it even more real. I looked down at our hands, then back at him. I don't know, I admitted quietly. But I know I don't want this to stop. Manuel's entire expression softened instantly. Good, he said. Good? Because I really don't want to go back to pretending you're just my friend. My heartbeat stumbled. The way he said just my friend felt important somehow. Like even before this, we'd already been something more. Neither of us spoke for a minute after that. Then suddenly Manuel laughed under his breath. What? You realize everybody from high school is going to lose their minds. I snorted. Honestly, some of them probably already assumed. Coach definitely did. Stop bringing that up. He used to watch you stare at me during practice. I was appreciating athleticism. You were appreciating my ass. I choked, laughing. Manuel looked deeply satisfied with himself. You're horrible. And yet, he said smugly, squeezing my hand again, you're still holding hands with me. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop smiling. Then, eventually, quieter this time, he said, I really like you, Quentin. Simple words, but hearing them from him felt overwhelming. I looked over. Manuel looked nervous again after saying it, like somehow admitting that mattered even more than the confession itself. And honestly, maybe it did, because this wasn't about tension anymore, or curiosity, or hidden feelings. This was him choosing me out loud. So I squeezed his hand back gently. I really like you too. And judging by the smile that slowly spread across his face, that might have been the moment he finally believed this was real too. By the time we crossed into Colorado, it didn't even feel like the same trip anymore. Everything had changed. Manuel kept one hand on the wheel and the other loosely tangled with mine whenever the road was empty enough. Every now and then he'd glance over at me for no reason except apparently confirming I was still there. And every single time, he smiled. It was ridiculous how much that affected me now. The mountains started appearing in the distance sometime near sunset, huge against the orange sky. Manuel whistled softly. Okay, this almost makes the terrifying motel worth it. Almost. He laughed, then quieter. Still kind of glad the storm happened though. I looked over at him. His expression softened immediately when our eyes met. And yeah, me too. By the time we finally reached his cousin's cabin, both of us looked exhausted. Cars filled the gravel driveway, music drifting through the trees from the backyard where people were already drinking around a fire pit. Manuel parked the Jeep and looked at me. You ready? For what exactly? He grinned nervously, pretending we didn't completely change our lives yesterday. My stomach flipped. That made it real again somehow. Not just us alone in a motel room. Real life, real people, real consequences. Manuel must have noticed the panic flicker across my face because his expression softened instantly. Hey, I looked at him. We go at your pace, okay? God, that nearly wrecked me more than anything else had, because that was always Manuel. Even now, after confessing everything, after kissing me half the night, he still cared more about making sure I felt safe than about himself. I nodded slowly. Okay. Then after a second, quieter, you really mean that? Obviously. The certainty in his voice calmed me immediately. We climbed out of the Jeep together and headed toward the cabin. The second Manuel's cousin spotted us, he yelled, Finally! Took you idiots long enough. Manuel laughed. Blame the storm. You two look suspiciously happy, another guy added from the porch. My heart instantly tried to escape my body. Manuel, meanwhile, looked completely calm. Too calm. Maybe we just missed you, he shot back casually. Liar. We got dragged into the chaos almost immediately. Drinks shoved into our hands, questions about the drive, somebody arguing loudly about burgers near the grill. But honestly, I barely paid attention, because every few minutes, I'd catch Manuel looking at me from across the yard, and every single time, my chest tightened. Eventually, the fire pit crowd grew louder, while the stars filled the sky overhead. I stepped away from the noise for a minute, wandering toward the edge of the property where the trees overlooked the mountains below. Cold air hit my face. Quiet. Peaceful. Then footsteps crunched behind me. I smiled before even turning around. Following me already? Manuel stopped beside me, shoulder brushing mine lightly. Can you blame me? We stood there quietly for a second, looking out over the mountains. Then Manuel spoke softly. You know what I realized today? What? I think I've been in love with you longer than I thought. My chest tightened instantly. I looked over at him. He looked nervous again. Not because he regretted anything, because he meant it. When? I asked quietly. Manuel laughed softly to himself. You remember when we graduated high school? Barely. It was like 100 degrees. You hugged me before we left. I frowned slightly. Okay. You held on longer than everybody else did. The memory hit me suddenly. Parking lot full of people, parents taking pictures, me hugging him goodbye because we were leaving for different colleges. I remembered not wanting to let go. I drove home thinking about it for hours, Manuel admitted quietly. Didn't understand why at the time. God. Manuel. I think some part of me always belonged to you, Quentin. That sentence hit so hard, I physically stopped breathing for a second. He looked embarrassed immediately after saying it, too. But before he could backtrack, I grabbed his hoodie and kissed him. Manuel made this surprise sound before kissing me back instantly, hands sliding around my waist. Slow kiss, cold mountain air, firelight glowing faintly behind us. Honestly, it felt unreal. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, smiling softly. There you are, he whispered. What? That look. I laughed quietly. You're obsessed with that. Because you only get it when you're really happy. And maybe he was right. Because standing there with him, after years of wanting something I thought I could never have, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Manuel brushed his thumb gently against my cheek. So, he murmured, smiling a little nervously now, what happens next? I looked at him, at my best friend, at the guy I'd loved for years without ever believing he could love me back. Then I smiled. I think we stop wasting time. The grin that spread across Manuel's face after that was probably the happiest I'd ever seen him. And a second later, he kissed me again under the Colorado night sky while our entire future waited somewhere ahead of us.